Hi, everybody. I'm here again today with my beautiful friend, Barbara Belger. Hi, Barbara. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Asha. It's so good to see you from my house to your house, from my heart to your heart. Kia ora koutou, everybody out there. Thanks for listening in. Looking forward to our meaningful conversation today. Asha, what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so coming at you from the beautiful far north, where there's lots of amazing people and amazing things happening up here. But of course, our minds are always stuck on what's happening in the world of COVID and all of the measures that are being taken, to deal with this pandemic and the effects, the real, very, very real effects that this is happening on us and our family, our friends, the people within our communities, and our society and our country as a whole. And there's just been so many developments, I guess, over the past couple of weeks that it might be good to kind of just have a little bit of a chat about. And then we're going to get stuck into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I think we'll be able to see the real stark contrast between the dystopia that we're living in at this time and those very, very important values that really must be upheld. So I suppose let's get started. I mean, mandates, a couple of weeks ago, mandates were announced for healthcare workers, teachers, and now I think that this is extending as well to prison staff and possibly police officers. I know firefighters are also being affected by this. So many people are standing to lose their jobs because of these mandates in all of these industries and sectors of society where we're already severely understaffed. And so thousands and thousands of people are actually prepared to walk away because their choice is not being honoured. So it's quite distressing. Just yesterday, I had
very stressful. I think that's what we need to point out. It is societal bullying, I think. Also, a few things people should remember: that a mandate is not a law.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into in a moment. It is still up to every individual, every employer, every CEO to decide what they want to do. It's really important. If they decide not to play this game, then don't, stick to it and be strong about it. And yes, people are walking out, like you say. We already don't have enough wonderful staff. Those people have been working. The irony is that when it comes to the nurses and first aiders, ambulance drivers and so on, they've been working, picking up people and working with people who may have a flu or a COVID or whatever for the last 18 months.
That's right.
They've been working with them, and then suddenly, and they are obviously fine, and now suddenly it just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. And I would really strongly recommend that we ask government officials to first get mandated, because they are equally as often in contact with the public as we are. And but they are, of course, excluded. So far, I saw in the government policies or somewhere that they are actually excluded. I would say no. Mm-hmm. No, first to, just look at the whole beehive. Let's make sure that our government officials are safe. And we choose the batches.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. The hypocrisy, of having these doctors and nurses and other frontline staff, putting themselves at risk, doing their job because they care, and then turning around and mandating them to have this vaccine against their will, especially when many of them likely have natural immunity that's developed from, the fact that they were on the front lines.
It should always be personal choice. It should always absolutely be personal choice.
Right, yeah.
But I think it's yeah, I mean, that's a whole, that this was always going to lead to it. And in the meantime, people know that they are not protected from the virus. That's now official. They can still get it, they can still spread it.
That's right.
So their immune system gets reduced every time they have the next injection. Now they're up to the booster. I think from my understanding, the FDA has just ruled against the booster. I have to check that again, but I'm pretty sure I saw, let me just check.
And of course, yesterday we
No,
saw tens of thousands of people, walking through Wellington to Parliament to say that freedom of choice, we want our freedom of choice, this is no longer acceptable. And so many of those people were nurses and firefighters, teachers who are being forced to walk away from their jobs. And I've even heard of several small schools where the schools are having to choose to close because, the parents, teachers, and students are choosing, exercising their right to not have this injection, and then therefore being forced to close. So it's just tragic that this is not being thought through, in any way.
I think where this is the same procedure as everywhere else in the world that we've observed is, there were tens of thousands. I would think people say, easily 20,000. Same in Melbourne. A friend of mine was out in the streets in Melbourne, and the press just reports that there were a couple of hundred people or whatever, 2,000 people. And in the case of our Prime Minister in her conference last night, she had a press conference and said, this is not what the majority is thinking. I would really doubt that. I would begin to doubt that. I know that some people are convinced that this jab, I will not ever call it vaccine, will actually help them. The vaccine is supposed, a vaccine never gets implemented while a pandemic is running. We need to also remember that. That's just rule number one. You vaccinate to increase people's immunity before the flu season, if you want to believe in that, or before, but never while a pandemic is still running. That's just not done. Yeah. So that is what, and then also maybe we can just remember that there were a couple of court cases. Yes. The midwives, nurses, teachers, there's quite a few lawyers now representing people in court. Mm-hmm. And that was presented to the High Court by the New Zealand doctors speaking out of science on Monday, I think. So we will see what comes of that.
Mm. Yes. So just recapping. So in regards to these mandates, I think shortly after that there was that interview with Jacinda Ardern from a New Zealand Herald reporter, where he says to her that she may disagree, but it appears that she is basically setting up a two-tier system, a two-class system within our country. One class for the vaccinated who get privileges and one for the unvaccinated who don't get those privileges. Now, when he said this to her, her response was to smirk and laugh and say, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. Now, at that moment, I lost any remaining respect that I had for that woman. And I would like to officially say, I think she is a psychopath. I think that's psychopathic behavior. And for her not to pretend that she doesn't understand the implications of all of these things that she is doing is just so disingenuous. And I just, I'm almost at a loss for words. And psychopath is the only word that really comes up when I try to understand, why would she be doing this? It's just totally unacceptable, this traffic light system that they want to implement after 90% of the population has been vaccinated. It's, yeah, I'm almost,
she did herself a big disfavor with, because that video, of course, went viral.
yeah.
And it hit a very delicate nerve in the New Zealand population, because one thing we all have in common here in New Zealand, we really stick together. I mean, yes, through this whole scenario, the crisis for the last 2 years, many differences have been, maybe, you know, the confrontations have been aggravated.
Mm-hmm.
But when she said that, and the overall response I got from people was, this is not New Zealand. We are not two-tier societies. That really, really upset a lot of people. And so and that's true. I mean, you know, when did we last hear that? When did we last hear that, you know? And I mean, I'm asking people, when is enough? When is enough enough? When you see your neighbor being transported to a camp somewhere because he's not vaccinated, or when your child gets access to university and your neighbor's best friend child doesn't. And when do you draw the line? This is something that people really need to be made aware of, because like we said in our last video, there comes a time where the line is crossed and it's very, very difficult to step back.
That's right. Yes, yes.
Yeah. However, and that will come. And I know we want to first talk about the legal side of things and human rights, and I think that's very important. I just want to quickly mention, if we have time to talk about that later, that totalitarian systems always implode. They are self-destructive. What we need to make sure is that we don't let it escalate. This is what, I mean, if you look into the different hikois and things that are happening, and people talking about kneecapping people and whatever, that is the typical symptom if totalitarianism gets the upper hand. And so we have to just make sure that we remain in peace and peaceful and patient, and let the system collapse in itself. It always different with dictatorship, different in you know, like in Egypt with pharaohs, and where it was just one ruling head. But this is totalitarianism, and that always, like Stalin and Hitler and Mussolini, it always self-implodes. It always collapses. We just have to remain true to ourselves and be connected to each other and do what we're doing. Keep repeating our messages to these beautiful people out there.
Absolutely.
We don't have to buy in. And but yes.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think you know, we're very much focused on resilience, you know, in most of the work that we do, and it's very positive and empowering work. So having conversations around this, really, you know, this is a crisis. No matter how you look at it, you know, we are in a perpetual crisis right now, and coming to terms with some of this bizarre stuff that is happening, and going through that process that we talked about quite a few months ago, the process of grief, you know, the process of dealing with, because it's traumatizing what's happening, you know, so there's a necessity for us to speak about it and to try to understand it, but also to come back to what you said, to come back to that center, you know, and decide how we want to move forward in a thoughtful, rational way, you know, where we respect where we're at. And we need to fully understand that violence and aggression only draws out more violence and aggression, especially when you're dealing with a state that is in a power and control dynamic. So what what will be the enduring theme that we need to hold to is exactly what you said, is that peaceful resistance, that this is not us, this is not okay, it's totally unacceptable, you know, and these people need to be held account. When that time comes, you know, we need to hold them to account. And just like we're going to talk about this, you know, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, when that declaration was created, it was created so that the atrocities of World War II would never, ever be repeated again. So, you know, and that document is meaningless unless we, the people, enact it and demand that it is followed. So, you know, we definitely need to, you know, find a way to process all this, because there is anger, there is grief, there's trauma, there's frustration, all of it's there. But at the end of the day, what will get us through to a better place is actually, yeah, staying as much in alignment as we can and drawing on, you know, that inner resilience, which we'll have a conversation about soon, you know, and start shifting to some of the more positive, empowering stuff. Because it, you know, it gets a bit ranty sometimes when you just like, you know, it's overwhelming trying to deal with all these incoming things. There's a couple of things.
The whole, what's underlying a totalitarian system is mass formation or crowd formation, which has been talked about you know, by quite a few people, and I've looked into some of their work, and it's great. But what is behind mass formation is a state of hypnosis. Mm-hmm. So, and in hypnosis, your focus shifts, right? And where it's different between dictatorship and totalitarianism is, in a totalitarian system, the leaders also are under some sort of hypnosis. So they just narrow, and they just lock everything out. And this is what we're doing. And if they don't follow the rules, then we just have to be stricter and stricter with the rules. And by doing what we're doing, Asha, is not breaking the hypnosis. That will come when this whole system falls apart. And then we have to be ready also to support people, because it's not nice. It's not going to be nice. People will be really grieving to realize that they've been screwed, you know. But repeating what we're doing, reminding people of their human rights, also pointing out how a lot of the measures just don't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, even now, lifting Auckland at some point, despite the cases obviously have gone up. Now the latest conference, she said, so, but we knew this, and we knew that the cases will go up. So it is within the scope that we predicted, and therefore now we can open up. So even that doesn't make sense, you know. Before we had one case, and that locked the whole of Auckland down, and so it just doesn't add up. It also, I mean, now the world needs to know that we have a border now, South and North Auckland. We have a border now in Northland, halfway through Northland. My shop manager can't come to work because she's on the other side of the border, and not in an essential service position. So, I mean, it's just the only thing I see is so many small, medium businesses are going down, closing down, and but yeah.
Yes.
Let's keep repeating, and every time people see us talking, the hypnosis will just get a little bit lighter, and they will just open up a little bit and see a little bit more of the stuff that they have not noticed.
That's right.
And they need to be made aware. I mean, there's beautiful projects now, hashtag on Twitter, hashtag, the translation would be died suddenly and unexpectedly. So it's a German hashtag, plötzlich und unerwartet. And everybody's feeding into that when people suddenly and unexpectedly are dying. There's a whole website they even made. And that is in direct vicinity to one or the second jab that they're getting. And it's potentially accelerating with the booster shots. So people need to know that.
That's right.
People really need to know that when they suddenly have an outbreak of shingles or herpes or any of their symptoms that they had before are exacerbated through this this poisonous spike protein, which is being injected in it. So if you had cancer, you managed it before, you had seizures or whatever, it will just be accelerated. People need to know that.
That's
but
right.
yes, but back to their human rights.
Well, yeah, well, just a few things maybe before we get onto that. It's just to kind of get a picture of what's happening up here in the far north, and this is likely happening, you know, all around the country. Just in this last week, I've had at least 3 people tell me that after their second injection, they had a severe adverse reaction. Now, some of those are being reported, but most of them aren't. And they're nowhere near as severe as we've seen with people like Casey Hodgkinson. For those who are familiar with Casey's situation, she is in severe pain and has what appears to be neurological damage, yet the doctors at the hospital have been giving her psychiatric drugs and trying to tell her that it's all in her head. If I can find Casey's video, I will. We'll link it in the description, because it's so important to watch and listen to people's personal stories. You know, and for me, that's one of the things that I always go back to as an advocate, is that there's no reason that those people wouldn't be telling the truth. You know, and once you start to see one after the other, after the other, after the other, the cognitive dissonance, you know, that we hold in our minds starts to be eroded, because we actually get the other side, the things that aren't appearing in the mainstream media, the genuine stories, human stories of people and what has happened to them who thought they were doing the right thing, but we're not hearing those stories. So please, if you have the opportunity to listen to people's personal testimonies, it's necessary. It's very necessary to do that, to understand. In the far north here now, we have the Vax buses, vans that are going around the towns. They have loudspeakers on them, blaring out to the town, get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated. You know, this is like from some alternate universe. You know,
it's a Mr. Whippy ice cream truck next to the Vax bus. So I think in Auckland it happened that they gave kids, was it Aotearoa school, where a father phoned the principal and said, how come my boy ends up with $50 and gets the jab from a bus that's parked in front of your school? Are you advocating this to 12-year-olds? And the principal did not really know what to say, nothing to do with her, that the bus was parked outside, but, you know, and the father was just speechless. That without consent, they even tell the children, you don't need to ask parental consent. So from now on, children 10 years old can go and buy alcohol and cigarettes and be left alone, you know, now that they can make their own decision on potentially dangerous and certainly, yeah, and not necessary. We've got to remember it's not necessary. A child is, and that's the FDA says that, the CDC says that all the reports that you're getting says that the child is not in danger. It's not in danger. It's, yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So on that basis, why do educators, you know, Yeah, none of it makes any sense. It's yes. All right, shall we jump to the human rights? Let's take a look at the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. All right, and I'll create this in a separate video. So watch the second part if you're keen to learn about that.